Dating and love is not hard because you are complicated. It's hard because you keep entering them from a nervous system that learned effort equals value. That line alone is going to piss people off, which is good, because if love keeps feeling exhausting, confusing, or emotionally expensive, it's not because you just haven't met the right person. It's because your nervous system still believes connection has to be earned. Ease doesn't come from luck, it doesn't come from timing, and it certainly doesn't come from chemistry. Ease comes from compatibility, a nervous system match, and mutual availability. And if that sentence makes you bored, skeptical, or slightly defensive, this episode is for you. Because when you've been trained in chaos, ease feels suspicious, calm feels empty, consistency feels like something is missing, and you start mistaking friction for fate. If it feels hard from the start, it's not destiny, it is friction. Hi, I'm Megan Webster. I'm an abuse recovery coach, a trauma-informed strategist, and the woman a narcissist hopes to never meet twice. This is the Narcissist's Worst Nightmare podcast, and this episode is not here to make you feel hopeful. It's here to get you honest. We're talking about why dating and love are actually easy with the right person, and why you don't have that yet is not because you're broken, guarded, or too much, but because you're still choosing from a system that confuses effort with depth and intensity with intimacy. This is Black Cat territory, discernment, not healing. And if you are ready to stop romanticizing the struggle and start recognizing alignment, stay with me. If love for you has historically come with unpredictability, emotional swings, or the need to manage somebody else's emotions, your nervous system learned that closeness equals work. Work meant attention, engagement, and staying relevant long enough not to be discarded. So when somebody shows up calmly, clearly, and consistency, your body does not light up, it goes quiet. And instead of interpreting the quiet as safety, you interpret it as boredom or lack of chemistry. That's not because you're incapable of attraction. It's because your system has been trained to associate activation with aliveness. Chaos kept you alert, alert felt like connection, connection felt like love, and ease removes the adrenaline. And when the adrenaline leaves, your body doesn't immediately replace it with pleasure, it replaces it with space. Space feels unfamiliar when your baseline was tension, so your mind starts narrating that something must be wrong. This is where women sabotage good connections without realizing it. They say things like, I don't feel it, or something's missing, when what's missing is the threat that their nervous system used to organize around. Ease feels wrong until safety becomes familiar. Effort has been romanticized into a virtue, especially for women who were taught that being chosen required emotional labor. You learned that if something took work, it mattered. If it required patience, it must be meaningful. If it demanded endurance, it must be love. So when a man requires very little effort to be with, communicates clearly, follows through, doesn't create emotional puzzles for you to figure out, you don't know where to put your energy. There's nothing to fix, nothing to manage, and nothing to anticipate. And instead of letting that be a relief, you experience a loss of purpose. This is where so many women unconsciously choose complicated men, not because they enjoy suffering, but because the complexity gives them something to do. It gives them a role. It gives them relevance. Effort creates the illusion of depth, but depth does not require exhaustion. It requires presence, and presence doesn't need performance to stay alive. If love feels like something you have to work for constantly, you are not in intimacy, you are in emotional labor. There's a belief that we need to smash here. Hard but passionate is not romance, it's dysregulation with a soundtrack. The intensity that gets labeled passion, often nervous system activation from unpredictability. High highs, low lows, long stretches of uncertainty punctuated by moments of connection that feel euphoric because they end the waiting. That isn't chemistry, that's relief. And relief feels intoxicating to you when you've been waiting for loss. This is why women stay longer than they should, because the good moments feel incredible, not because they're healthy, but because they end the anxiety cycle temporarily. Healthy connection doesn't create spikes, it creates steadiness. It doesn't hijack your attention, it supports your presence. If passion requires chaos to exist, it is not desire, it's dependency. I want to share a moment that happened with you from last summer. My boyfriend and I do a lot of reflection of timelines and things that have happened between us in the past year, mainly the last 6 months, but in the summer something hit me very quietly, which is how safety tends to arrive when you're not used to it. I was sitting with this low grade restlessness in my body. There was nothing wrong, no weird energy, no mixed signals from him, no disappearing acts, no emotional volatility. My boyfriend was consistent, present, affectionate, and super clear. And instead of my nervous system relaxing into that, I noticed myself getting edgy, not anxious in the old way, more like alert. So I initiated a "what are we" conversation, not because I thought he was seeing other people or because the connection was confusing or because I didn't feel secure. None of the usual reasons, but it caught me off guard when I reflected on it later, because if I was being honest, I already knew where I stood. What I didn't know yet was how deeply my body associated intensity with connection. In my past 2 relationships, both with narcissistic partners, there was always this kind of like capture phase. It's very typical of narcissists. Big gestures, fast escalation, emotional fireworks, the need to move in together, this big scene. And that sense of being chosen loudly and immediately looks romantic on the surface, but it wires your nervous system to believe that love arrives with force, urgency, and friction. So here I was in something steady, and my system didn't really know how to read it. And I kept thinking something should be happening. There should be a moment, a spike, a defining scene. And that's when it really hit me. My body wasn't looking for an actual answer. It was trying to find tension. The conversation itself is something I will always remember. He always makes space to connect with me, especially when it's about us or feelings or past traumas that come up. He had picked me up from a staycation. The conversation was calm, grounded, easy. He answered directly. No defensiveness, no power struggle, no hook, no shame. And afterwards, instead of feeling like a sense of relief, I just kind of felt into myself, a bit of emptiness, and not because there was something missing, but because nothing had been taken from me in that conversation. There was space held, there was connection, there was understanding in that conversation, which is the moment I realized that the discomfort wasn't a red flag, it was still my nervous system withdrawing. For almost a decade between those 2 narcissistic relationships, my nervous system had been trained to equate safety with boredom and friction with intimacy. So when connection showed up, my body went looking for something to grab onto, a problem to solve, a moment to be careful of. Our relationship this past summer taught me something that was really fundamental. Ease didn't feel wrong because it was wrong. It felt wrong because it was new. And once I saw that, I stopped mistaking peace, slowness, and calm for a lack of chemistry and started recognizing it as capacity and safety. Because ease is not fireworks. It's not intensity. It's not that feeling that something is about to happen. It looks like consistency without performance. Follow through without reminders, interest that doesn't fluctuate based on your availability, conversations that don't leave you replaying what you said. Ease looks like your body staying regulated after a date or a time together instead of being activated. It looks like sleeping normally. It looks like not needing reassurance to feel secure. And this is the part most women miss. Ease does not feel exciting at first, it just feels neutral, which is not the absence of attraction. It's the absence of threat. Attraction grows after safety, not before it. But if you're expecting attraction to create safety, you're going to keep choosing friction over a good fit. Now, this is a part I want to hold a mirror to your face. Why do you not have safe and easy love yet? You don't have ease because you're selecting from sensation instead of actual evidence. You're still letting chemistry audition people before the behavior has a chance to speak. You're still prioritizing how someone makes you feel early over how they show up consistently over time. It doesn't necessarily mean you're dating wrong. It means your nervous system is still oriented towards familiarity instead of compatibility. And that orientation doesn't change through insight alone. It changes through practice inside of attraction. This is where a lot of women will stall. They know what they want intellectually, but they have not trained their bodies yet to tolerate calm without interpreting it as disinterest. There is also a withdrawal phase when the chaos leaves, and this part is uncomfortable enough that many women never make it through it completely, not because they lack discernment or maturity, but because their nervous system has never been taught how to live without volatility, organizing, connection. When chaos exists in your dating life, your body experiences something that feels like loss, even when nothing bad is about to happen. The spikes disappear, the emotional swings flatten, the constant anticipation dissolves. What replaces it is quiet, and quiet feels deeply unfamiliar when your system equated intensity with aliveness. The body does not immediately interpret calm as safe, it interprets it as absence, and that absence can feel unsettling. You notice yourself scanning for something to react to. You feel the impulse to create friction just to confirm that you matter. You might catch yourself wanting a harder conversation, a dramatic disclosure, or a destabilizing stabilizing interaction simply to feel movement again. This is not necessarily self-sabotage. It is your nervous system that learned connection through stimulation is still trying to reorient itself. This is why so many women confuse nervous system withdrawal with incompatibility. They tell themselves something is missing when what's actually missing is the chaos. Your body is detoxing from cortisol and adrenaline that once passed for chemistry. Without those chemicals, attraction doesn't vanish, it does change its form. It slows, it deepens, it becomes less performative and more embodied. If you ever walked away from someone good because it felt flat, boring, or strangely uncomfortable, this is where it happened. Not because the connection lacked depth, but because your nervous system had not yet learned how to experience intimacy without bracing for impact. This phase is not a signal to leave. It is an invitation to stay long enough for your nervous system to discover that nothing bad happens when things remain steady. That learning is what rewires attraction at the deepest level. And I want to share a data layer that collapses all of the fantasy around this. So fantasy survives when evidence is sparse. It thrives in gaps, inconsistencies, and unanswered questions. When someone is emotionally unpredictable, your mind fills in the blanks. You imagine who they could become. You project intention into words. You build futures on promises instead of patterns because the lack of data leaves room for hope to masquerade as insight. Consistency is going to collapse that illusion. When someone does what they say repeatedly, there is no fantasy to hide. Behavior becomes visible. Time tells the truth. Patterns replace projection. This can feel strangely exposing because it removes the story you were telling yourself and replaces it with reality. For many women, this is the first time attraction is allowed to form after safety instead of before it. Instead of intensity pulling you forward, the information grounds you. You no longer have to guess, interpret, or decode. You observe, you feel, and you respond based on what's happening, not on what might happen. This is where self-trust starts to be rebuilt. Not through affirmations or insight, but through actual lived experiences. Each consistent interaction becomes data your nervous system can rely on. Each follow-through teaches your body that connection does not require vigilance to survive. Attraction here feels different, quieter, but also more stable. There's no crash. It accumulates over time. Desire grows because safety creates space for it, not because fear fuels it. This is what grounded chemistry looks like when you are no longer being hijacked by survival wiring. This is why you need to practice when your attraction is active, not when you rehearse it in calm. It teaches you how to remain grounded when behavior accumulates instead of rushing to meaning. It gives your nervous system structure so sensation doesn't outrun discernment. It keeps you from negotiating with chemistry before reality has had time to speak. This is not about suppressing attraction. It's about letting attraction mature into evidence. That's how trust in yourself returns, not because you became detached, but because you stayed present long enough for the truth to reveal itself. The right connection does not require performance to sustain interest. You don't need to explain yourself into safety. You don't need to make your needs smaller to stay desirable. You don't need to be impressive, agreeable, or endlessly flexible to remain chosen. If you feel like you are constantly adjusting your tone, your pacing, your expectations to keep someone engaged, that is not attraction, that is adaptation. It is your nervous system scanning for how to remain connected without creating disruption. Love that is a true fit does not demand endurance as an entry fee. It does not ask you to prove your worth through patience, sacrifice, or emotional labor. It will meet you without requiring self-abandonment at the cost of closeness. This can feel very disorienting at first. When you are not required to earn affection, old identities will collapse. You are no longer the fixer, the understanding one, or the emotional anchor. You are simply yourself, and for many women, that simplicity feels exposed until it feels liberating. If ease feels suspicious, it's not because something's missing. It's because friction used to be familiar for you. And familiarity is not the same as a good fit. When connection no longer requires chasing, fixing, or proving, power quietly returns to you, not as dominance, but as self-possession. That is the difference between dating from survival and dating from sovereignty. Here's the truth that most people don't want to accept. You don't need more passion, you need less guessing. If love keeps feeling hard, it's not because love is supposed to hurt. It's because your system is still oriented towards effort instead of alignment. Ease is not boring, it's unfamiliar. together. Consistency isn't dull, it's revealing. Safety isn't passionless, it's where real desire actually has room to grow. If this episode cracked something open in you, good. That means you're waking up to places where you've been calling friction chemistry and endurance love. Share this with another woman who keeps mistaking effort for depth. Hit follow so you don't miss the next one. And if you are ready to stop dating from survival and start choosing from sovereignty, the Black Cat Academy is where this work deepens. You don't need to become somebody else to be loved. You need to stop proving you are worthy of it.